So our final topic for this week of contentious topics is immigration. So we've already talked about prostitution and drugs and guns. How does immigration fit into this? Well, with all of these topics, there's some element of how do we weigh personal autonomy, personal choice, people choosing to do the things that they want to do, that they think are best for them, versus what we think is best for society. And so that trade-off that came out in prostitution, that came out in drug use, that came out with guns, gun control, gun violence, and it comes through in immigration as well. So here, if we're going to weigh individual choice really heavily, then we're going to want to say people should have a choice of where to move, where they want to go. We should let them choose what they think will be best for them and their families. That would generally be a pro-immigration sort of stance. And so this is an area where the kind of libertarian free market thinking is in many ways running against the conservative position, the traditional position within the U.S. political scene. That's true in a lot of drug issues as well, where libertarians would say more, let people do what they want to do. A lot of traditional conservatives in the U.S. would say we need to protect the traditional family, we need to protect our communities, we need to make these things illegal, prostitution, drugs, immigration, and where libertarians would say we should let people choose what they want to do, including if they want to move, including across the border. So we have that individual choice element on one side. On the other side, we again have this kind of what's for the societal good. And here, much like with gun control, we have a lot of debate about whether immigration tends to lead to negative or positive spillovers on people. And so there's research that goes both ways. Here there's a little bit more, it's a little bit less muddy, at least from an economic standpoint. The weight of the evidence, so not all of it by any means. There's controversy, there's conflicting evidence, but the weight of the evidence in economics points toward immigration generally being good for society, good for the overall economy, good for growth. And so what do I mean by that? Well, there's countervailing forces. When we have people moving into a country, that's more workers who are going to compete with the people who are already here for jobs. And you hear that narrative a lot, that you have foreigners coming in and taking jobs away from Americans, right? And that's true. I mean, that is something that happens. There is another force. So we have foreigners coming into U.S. and creating jobs, starting businesses, running restaurants, running tech firms, coming up with big ideas. The Moderna vaccine for coronavirus, that's a joint project with a German firm started by, I believe they're Turkish immigrants to Germany, and Moderna itself in the U.S. is run by immigrants and second-generation immigrants, I believe. And there's just an example of we have people coming into this country with high levels of skills. They're not coming to compete for jobs. They're coming to be able to take advantage of the really deep market that we have in the US. They've got these ideas that they think are worth a lot, and they want to create businesses based on those. So those are the job creators. And so there's both of those effects. And so again, it depends if we're looking at, you know, landscaping jobs in certain parts of the country. Immigrants probably tend to take away jobs from Americans, right? If we're looking at IT jobs, we're probably looking at immigrants coming in and doing jobs that companies are having a hard time finding Americans for. And so those immigrants are actually providing really valuable labor. I grew up in a farming family, and I worked on the farm when I was growing up, but it was hard to find high school students, people like me, to pick all of the asparagus that needed to be picked. A lot of it was done by migrants, and most of them were coming up. They would be in Texas for part of the year, coming up to Michigan for harvest seasons. But traditionally, those families actually went down to Mexico and came up to the U.S. So there was a history of kind of a constant migration that involved immigration when we're talking about crossing borders. And again, if there aren't locals who are willing to do those jobs for the prevailing wages, then we're not talking about displacing American workers. We're talking about picking the crops that we all use as part of our food supply. And so that's part of the debate that you hear when it comes to immigration. Much like gun control, you have people who are passionate about their beliefs. There is evidence on both sides about kind of the overall societal effects. It's a complicated issue, much like gun control. So immigration is another one of these issues where it's nice to have a context and to have some tools to think about, well, how much do we weigh people's ability to choose for themselves versus kind of societal good? Can we agree on what that societal good is? If not, okay, we're gonna have a difficult time reaching agreement. But if we can agree what the societal effect is, then we can talk about how we make that trade-off. And hopefully just having that perspective and the tools that we're putting together helps us do a better job of engaging as citizens in these important discussions that we have. So thank you, guys.